Howdy, friends, and welcome to The Storyfield. This is a podcast where we talk about business, faith, and life in general.
Okay, so here's the deal. We want you to be encouraged. We want you living in hope. This life we live is complex. It's hard at times. At The Storyfield, you will find great stories of normal people just like us who will inspire you. Our goal is that you leave encouraged, inspired, and excited to move forward in life. But before we get started, one thing though, if you're listening and you find yourself really hopeless right now, send us an email at hope@thestoryfield.com so we can pray for you. Thanks for joining us today. Let's get started.
Hey, Storyfield, it's your friend Micah. I'm back with one of my friends that I think I've known probably almost 20 years. His name is Trey Williams. Welcome to the show, Trey.
Thank you for having me, Micah. I'm excited to be a part of this Storyfield podcast.
Now, what's cool about me and Trey is we have probably done 7,000 things together, and most of them were not related to each other. So we just end up crossing paths or doing projects or whatever it is. But Trey, I really want people to know where you ended up now. So we'll come back and give the big scope, but just give me a small scope of what you're doing now.
So I am the executive director of a nonprofit called Ancora Ministries. And basically we feed kids. We work in Central Texas doing food security programs through local schools. And we've got nutrition and clean water programs in 3 different regions in Guatemala. So we're all about helping kids be everything that God created them to be.
That is awesome. You're doing it here, you're doing it there. But before we get into the minutia of that and how people can help you, let's, as we do on every Storyfield episode, let's kind of go back to the beginning, where you grew up. And if you didn't get to Texas, which is probably the best state ever, in most people's opinion who live here, how did you get here? Or just tell me about all the way up to maybe high school. Just, let the people know who you are.
All right. Well, I did not start out here in Texas. I was born in Mississippi and spent the first about 9.5 years of my life there. That's where most of my extended family lives. And my dad got a job in Del Rio, Texas, when I was in 4th grade. And Del Rio is on the border between Texas and Mexico. So it was a complete and utter culture shock. I went from a place where you had Black people and you had white people, and everybody was, it was pretty much an equal mix, to going to the border where it was 85% Hispanic, probably about 5% Anglo, and just about everybody spoke Spanish. Like, you go to McDonald's, the menu's in English and in Spanish. You sit in class and your teacher is teaching in English, and halfway through a sentence switches to Spanish to emphasize a point because most everybody in the class gets it. I remember sitting at my desk, and these kids gathered around me because it was like, whoa, the new toy, like this white kid from with the weird accent,
right?
Like, they loved the way I twanged, but they gathered around me and they said, "Are you a kicker or a lowrider?" And I was like, I have no idea what we're talking about right now, but they both feel like the wrong answer.
Right.
So,
and you probably hadn't heard much Spanish before you got there. There's probably not a lot of that in wherever you were in Mississippi.
No. I mean, to me, like, here was my international, I can't think of words right now, but sophistication. Like, to me, a taco was an old El Paso taco shell with old El Paso jarred taco sauce and old El Paso envelope of taco seasoning over the ground beef that my mom browned. And, that was it. So Del Rio was a whole new world in just about every context. My dad was in manufacturing, and his company ended up, this was right when they call them maquilas. Well, they still call them that, which means manufacturers. And U.S. companies began building plants in Mexico and they would call them twin plants because they would have like warehouses on the U.S. side and the manufacturing facilities on the Mexican side. So my dad would work in Mexico every day, but that's what brought us to Texas, and that's where I grew up. So I'm so glad that I did. Like, it just really opened a whole new world for me. And as we'll probably talk later, that really set the table for a lot of what became important to me later in life. But I don't want to underemphasize the fact that I learned about what fajitas were by living in Del Rio.
Well, and they're probably some of the best
Oh,
you can get
clearly.
anywhere.
Yes. I would like, I'd never gone to a restaurant. You go to, and you get chips and salsa at the table before they feed you the real food. I was just like, I don't know what's happening right now, but
Right.
this is awesome.
So, okay, so you get to Texas and you're having kind of like a cultural moment because it's stuff you've never seen, heard, tasted. Um, so I'm guessing you're there probably around fourth or fifth grade.
Yep.
Now you're going into high school. What are those things that you decided that you're gonna do in high school? Because
Well,
everybody kind of makes a choice based on what they see or do or whatever their parents did or whatever it is.
absolutely. Yeah. So I got really good grades. So was usually slotted in the classes with the accelerated classes, but I was a total band nerd. My mom was very gifted musically. She was a pianist, she was a vocalist, but she was also a clarinet player. So I kind of grew up hearing about her awesome high school band, and so I knew that band was what I wanted to do, and that was my thing, pretty much starting as soon as I could join a band program, which was sixth grade. And of course, in addition to music and all of the activities that go along with being in band, you kind of find your tribe in there too. So, my best friends were other kids that I was around all the time in band.
Nice. And band takes up a lot of time. And if you've never been in band in high school or never had a kid in band in high school, there's probably 4 or 5 different bands they can join. There's a jazz band, there's a pep band, there's of course, the marching, a football band. Um, Now my daughter is in band and she's going here and there and everywhere. And I was in band, but I don't remember going to anything cool when I was in band. I think we did like maybe the Houston Christmas parade one year. And we had a ginormous band. I mean, we probably had 300 and something kids,
Wow.
and maybe that's why we didn't get to go. But like, I know you and I know how well of a musician you are. Uh, let's just take a minute and brag about all the cool stuff you got to do in band.
Well, okay, let me set the stage for just a second because Del Rio, Texas is kind of an outpost. The nearest community to Del Rio is 30 miles away. So we had to go to San Antonio, which was 3 hours away, to play a district football game. There wasn't like you get to Del Rio and you're there unless you want to travel. And so it we didn't have the greatest band program, and you're
Right.
right. When I was in high school, the opportunities and activities that these kids do today were not as readily available. I began to find some band activities that were available to me outside of just regular school and UIL stuff. Texas is very competitive. We're competitive about everything, right? Including band. And so I auditioned for a couple of bands outside of district and region and all that stuff. The summer between my junior and senior year, SeaWorld was opening in San Antonio, and they decided that they wanted to put together an all-state band made up of high school kids to promote the opening of the park. So I saw this poster on the wall of the band hall one day, and it gave the audition information. So I recorded an audition tape, sent it in, and then so back in those days, you got letters in the mail because there
Right.
was no email.
And it took a while.
Yeah. So you send it off. You're like, I don't know if I'm going to hear back from these people and when, but I got a letter from them. maybe it was a phone call, I don't remember, but they said, hey, you're a finalist. We want you to do a live audition. So had to go to San Antonio for the live audition and made the band. And the cool thing was, well, there were two cool things. One is in high school in Texas, you like to put patches on your jacket. So that meant I got a cool patch on my jacket. But even better was we got to travel around that whole year promoting SeaWorld. So we went to Chicago to the McDonald's Christmas parade.
Oh
Yeah,
my
which is
gosh.
okay, where I heard the McDonald's All-American Band play in concert, and high school kids, phenomenal. Um, and we got to march in the Cotton Bowl parade. We got to march the halftime at the Cotton Bowl football game on New
Wow.
Year's Day. And Houston Livestock and Rodeo, we marched in that parade and played a concert there after the band Alabama. So nobody cared about us, but it was cool to be there because we got to listen
Just
to
the moms. The moms were there.
That's right. But we all had a great time at the concert,
Right.
And then, of course, when SeaWorld opened, we were there that whole opening week doing parades and shows and all sorts of fun stuff. And I actually re-auditioned my senior year, made the band again. And we were supposed to do the Macy's parade, and then they cut the funding for the band like
Oh
halfway. Yeah.
Ah.
And so all we did that year after September was they said, well, we're still going to send you to the Cotton Bowl. So we still got to do the Cotton Bowl parade and halftime show, which, fun fact, Troy Aikman was the quarterback for UCLA in the Cotton Bowl.
Wow.
Another fun fact, I did not meet him.
Boo.
But that was a lot of fun. So one of the things, I'm going to back up for a second if I can.
Okay, before you get there real quick, when you sent your audition tape, was it on CD or cassette?
It was cassette, man.
See, okay, all you young people that are listening to this, there used to be this rectangle thing, and it had two holes in the middle, and it just ran tape, and we had to record everything on that tape. Your life is pretty good, kids. Just saying. Okay,
Yeah.
now go back.
So, because Del Rio is it's kind of a small town, like 30,000 people. So it's a one high school town, which means the schools are big, right? Because they all feed into one high school, but it's still this small community. And so one of the neat things that helped me a lot as a middle school trumpet player was the high school kids would come in sometimes if you're, having a rehearsal and they would listen, and sometimes they would offer advice. But one of the things that we loved was watching them on Friday night, right? Like those are your first heroes. And one of my good buddies, who's still one of my very good buddies, his brother was 5 years older than us, and just the brother and the brother's best friend were phenomenal trumpet players. And so because my friend was related, I won't say I struck up a friendship because I was terrified of these people. I admired them and was terrified of them, but being in close contact with them motivated me and gave me a chance to just kind of learn some little tricks. And one of the things I did one summer, the summer after 8th grade, is they formed a community jazz band made up of people all over the community. And it was mostly, and these two guys had just graduated from high school, so they were the lead trumpet players in the band. And then there were a couple other trumpet players in the band who'd already graduated, and they needed a fifth. So somehow I, stumbled into this community jazz band, and I spent a summer, we would rehearse 2 or 3 times a week for like 3 hours, and we did concerts throughout the summer. But they really mentored me. Like I'm trying to be invisible at the end of the trumpet line and not screw up and get yelled at. But they, kind of drew me out. And at one point, the lead guy said, you're going to play this solo. You need to play a solo in the concert. And they encouraged me, and just being around excellence, even if you're not being formally educated in whatever that context is, you can't help but get better at it. And I think spending time around these really good musicians who were patient and wanted to pour into me really helped me as a musician, and it just gave me some confidence as a person, I think, which kind of that helped to give me the confidence to audition for things like the SeaWorld band.
Well, and I think it also it's they were kind of teaching you like good leadership. Like they sounded like they were a little humble. I mean, they knew they were good and they knew they could have done all the solos, but they were like, you know what? We're gonna make everybody better so that we all sound better. And that's like one things I hear about the fine arts programs is that, you know, for the whole group to sound good, they all have to up their game a little bit. And you know, I was in band and choir, and I know I had my frenemies that I really wanted to beat all the time, but the only way I was ever going to beat them was if I practiced and practiced and practiced and did the little extra thing that happened in the summer. Or maybe I'm going to 3 choir camps or whatever it is. Um, it's just so cool that you were able to kind of experience not only the tips and tricks of the top guys leaving and you're just swooping in, but then you also get to kind of get a feel for how you should probably like, I mean, a good way to treat people, right?
Yeah. I mean, and I think you're right, especially in, you know, in an environment that's competitive, we are kind of conditioned to see how far we can go. You know, how good can I be? How much can I accomplish? And to also have dropped into this environment, hey, you need to be the best. You should strive to be the best you can be, but also what are you doing for those who are coming after you? Not something that I probably would have come up with on my own, but having that um, exemplified for me
Right.
really made me, and of course, I wasn't thinking about that at age 13, 14, 15, but by the time the end of my junior year in high school is rolling around and I'm thinking about, I'm not going to be here much longer, those things made a lot more sense because you do think about, well, what do I know that somebody needs to know?
Right.
And you're right. I mean, what a great leadership lesson to be able to give away something that you've earned to somebody. It's like a down payment on their future, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. And it's also like you know, my daughter's going to be a senior. Your son's a senior right now, about to graduate. It's like, okay, you have an opportunity to kind of leave a legacy with those that are just starting out, that are baby fish or sophomores or still kind of clueless. You have the ability to maybe change someone's mind, path, trajectory of what they're going to end up doing later because you were either nice or, you know, you're like you the biggest cheerleader for them. And man, that's just awesome. Okay, so you get to hang out with all these cool guys and you do all this cool summer band stuff and travel the nation. And yeah, I went to Houston once. So we're both fans of the same university. Was band the reason you decided to go? Okay, how did you get to where you wanted to go for college?
Well, I really thought I wanted to go far away. You know, I was looking at Vanderbilt. I applied to Vanderbilt. I applied to Rice. I applied to some university in Virginia. Like I was going. And then I started learning about how much those schools cost. And my sister, who's a year older than me, she went to University of Texas. And so you know, I guess about halfway through my senior year, I thought, well, I'll apply to UT also. And I did. And then I kind of I won't say I backed into UT. And I don't want to say that it was like my backup plan, but I think when I realized Rice and Vanderbilt and all these places, like that sounds cool and all, but it, I don't know that, well, I can't afford to go there, right? So UT is fine. And so that's not an awesome, you know, the UTXs are not going to come calling on me to give the awesome why I went to Texas
The
story.
graduation speech. You're not
That's
doing the
right.
commencement
That's
address.
right. But you know, once I got there, and I had no intention of being in the Longhorn Band. I was like, they're too good. You know, I'm not going to make this band. And
Right.
I go to orientation, freshman orientation, which was, you know, UT used to do like a 3-day orientation in the summer. And I guess they probably still do. But the guy who was the president of the Longhorn Band, like the last day of orientation, Longhorn Band comes and does a presentation to anybody who's interested. So I thought, well, I'll sit in. And the president of the band, who is actually a guy who is still a friend of mine, or we reconnected through, another mutual friend.
Right.
He made it sound so accessible and so possible to be a part of this amazing organization. And then, they do a really good job of explaining, of myth busting, right? He's like, hey, if you think you got to be a music major to be in the Longhorn Band, oh, and hey, insiders, we call it LHB. Okay. So
LHB.
yeah, if you know a band person from Texas and you say LHB, they're going to think you're on the inside.
Wow.
But guy, he said, most people think that you got to be a music major to be an LHB. And he said the vast majority of LHB members are not music majors. And we have the highest collective GPA of any organization on campus. And he just kind of goes on. And I started thinking, wait a second, maybe I can do this. Yeah. And so I submitted, once again, an audition tape.
On cassette?
On cassette.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah. And then I got a letter in the mail, a paper, one of those paper things, and got in. So I was like, okay, that's cool. And so I was a part of the basketball band as well. And that was back, UT in those days had a really good basketball program. So that made it a lot of fun as well.
Hey, y'all. I just want to make an observation. When I see someone going through a legal situation, it seems like there are way too many unknowns. Well, the Allen firm provides legal guidance so that you can make a great decision, come to a resolution, and be at peace. For more information about the Allen firm, visit allenlawfirm.com.
And you get to go to travel, and you get to go to all the playoff games. Well, I would say all of them, but most of them. And then if you make it into the March Madness, you get to go to those games, because I go to a lot of March Madness games now, and that is always so cool to see them right underneath the basket. Like, who would have thought that, like, those 36 kids or whatever that's down there are like, oh, I get to travel to different cities every week for a month, It
was fun. Yeah, we went to such exotic locations as Dallas, Texas.
That's exotic.
Dayton, Ohio, which had a really cool airplane museum, by the way. And you're going to like this, Greensboro, North Carolina.
I do like me some Greensboro.
Yeah. And in fact, that year, if we had won, we lost in the first round. If we had won, we were going to play Duke. And that was Duke's, was that the year that Duke, that was their second national championship year. So that would have been 91.
Yeah. No, the first one, it was 91 and 92.
Yeah, it was 92. Yeah. We were in Greensboro in 92, and we were going to play Duke, and we knew they were going to kill us, but we just, took care of business by losing in the first round and not getting to get killed by Duke.
Losing graciously.
That's right.
To the Bobby Hurleys and that's so funny.
Yeah.
Okay. So, so what did you do? What was like if you're not a music major, what was your major when you were at UT?
So I went in as an undeclared major. I don't even know if that's allowed anymore, because we want kids to practically declare a major in high school these days. But back then you could. So I was in the liberal arts college, had no idea what I was going to do, but my very first semester at UT, you had to take 4 semesters of a foreign language. So I took Spanish. Believe it or not, living in Del Rio, Texas for 8 years, I never learned how to speak Spanish. But what I found in my very first Spanish class at UT was that it all made sense to me, because I'd grown up listening to it. So I found myself that entire first semester going, oh, that's what that means. Oh, that's what that means. And I was really good at it, because I was accustomed to the cadence, the vocabulary, the pronunciation. And so then I started thinking, well, maybe I'll just major in Spanish. You get a master's degree in international business. I could be a teacher. It's all this versatility. And so after my first semester at UT, I declared my major to be Spanish. And nice. That's what I did. I majored in Spanish and got a BA in Spanish.
Nice. And of course, I mean, as we will get to, that helped you later down the line. But what else did you do? Is that all? Did you get to do some other cool band things?
I did. So, one year, if you're a band person, then there's this thing called Drum Corps International, or here's another fun little insider thing that we say, DCI.
Okay.
And basically it's like professional marching band in the summer. And it's drum and bugle corps. And so I auditioned for a drum and bugle corps between my junior and senior years at UT and went on tour with a group called the Skyriders. So the Skyriders have since folded, although they're trying to come back. But we what you'd do is you'd audition in the fall, and then you'd have a weekend camp every month from November to May, and you'd go like Skyriders was based in outside of Dallas at the time, DeSoto. So we would have camps in either DeSoto or in Spring, Texas, outside of Houston.
Yeah.
You just go to a high school, you take your sleeping bag, you'd sleep on a gym floor all weekend, and you'd rehearse for 12 hours on Saturday and, like 6 or 7 hours on Sunday and like 4 or 5 hours on Friday night. And then you'd come at the end of the college semester, and we had this 2-week camp where we would rehearse like 12, 14 hours a day for 2 weeks and put our competition show together. And then after that, you go on tour all over the country and you play these shows. So if you are a band person and you've been to a band, Bands of America show, or even just a marching contest, similar format, bunch of corps, just they put their show on the field and they compete for prizes, and then you sleep in gym floors all summer or on buses. And
I was going to say it's not the glamorous. Oh, we get a hotel, and we make a lot. And we're all adults doing marching band, doing really cool shows, most amazing musicians, for really no money at all. And sometimes you have to pay to do it, right?
You got to pay to do drum corps, yeah. And if you think like the economics back then, like it's a pretty decent cost if you think about what you're doing for 2 months. But when you think about you're eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, you're drinking watered down Kool-Aid, you're sleeping on a gym floor, you might, like the few times you get hot water in the shower, it might be scalding hot, so it is definitely not, it's not 5-star stuff, or at least for the Skyriders, it wasn't. There were some other corps that were a little better off than us. And, if the bus breaks down, now you're piling a whole bus full of people onto 2 other buses and you're sleeping in the aisles. And, but it's gosh, the camaraderie of it, musically, I improved so much because I was playing all the time.
Right.
And there's nothing like it. I still say that was, that's the best summer of my life. I've still got friends from that summer who I'm close to, because it creates a bond that is unlike many others, for sure.
Right. And okay, so man, that is awesome. I always look at those DCI guys, and we know a bunch of mutual people that were in DCI.
Yeah.
And they all have the same stories of like, yeah, I may have eaten a sandwich once every other day a couple times. The newly waxed basketball floors are not the best to sleep on. But so you're doing your Spanish and you're doing all these band things. Did you have time to work? Did you what did you do in your free time? Were you like the party animal, or did you just sit in the library and study all the time?
Well, I did both of those things all the time.
Okay.
So back in those days, UT was very affordable, even, for then. And Austin was much more affordable than it is now. But my dad actually, so halfway through my senior year in high school, my dad got a new job and moved from Del Rio to El Paso. And so Mom and I stayed in Del Rio so I could graduate. And when I got moved up to college, Mom moved to El Paso to, with Dad. But the summer, right after I graduated, before my freshman year, my dad lost his job. Oh. And it was a weird thing. Like he lost his job, and then they rehired him at a much lower wage, much lower salary. So all of a sudden, money for college, I had some scholarships, which were going to probably pay my first year of tuition. But all of a sudden, there wasn't money to send me to college. And so I started looking for a job, part-time job, almost as soon as I moved to Austin. And maybe the worst job I've ever had was a telemarketing job, uh,
Mm.
selling shares in a private oil company.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Yes. I mean, who doesn't want to listen to an 18-year-old kid tell them why they should invest in
Correct.
oil, right?
In oil. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
because you know all the details.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I might have gotten one person to agree to let us send them a brochure or whatever, but I would watch the clock at that job. It was horrible. Like that was one of those jobs where I'm like, do I need to go to the bathroom? Let me concentrate really hard so that I need to
Right.
go to the bathroom so I can get up out of this chair. So I started looking for another job, and I found an ad in the UT papers called the Daily Texan, and it was for um, a cookie company in downtown Austin. So I called the guy. I'm like, "Hey, are you still hiring?" He goes, "Well, I think I've already made my decision, but come on down and I'll talk to you." So I go down, find this place. It's about 2 blocks from the Capitol on Congress Avenue in Austin, and it's called Kevin's Cookies and Cream. And Kevin, reads my application, and he's like, "Oh, you're in the basketball band. Well, I just got season tickets to UT basketball." And so we start talking about UT basketball, and we just really hit it off. And he said, "You know what? Um, he said, let me call you back this afternoon. I need to do some thinking. I thought I knew who I was going to hire, but I need to think a little bit more now." So, and he called me back that afternoon, and he said, "If you want the job, it's yours." So I said, "Awesome." So I start working at Kevin's Cookies and Cream. We made cookies, muffins, and sold Bluebell ice cream, and made this really great homemade lemonade. And I was a counter clerk. And the next semester, the spring semester, Kevin taught me how to make the cookies. So I started making cookies, and that summer I was going to go home because I needed to buy a car. So I told him I need to go live with my parents for the summer so that I can work a lot and save all my money to buy a car.
Right.
Any chance I could have this job back when I get back in the fall? And he
Right.
says, "Oh yeah." He says, "Absolutely. And I'm going to write you a letter to give to your prospective employers this summer." And he did. So I worked that summer at a Denny's in El Paso, bought
Yes.
myself a car, and came back in the fall. And Kevin had 2 shops actually in downtown Austin. And I got back in the fall, and he said, "Hey, our other location, we're going to expand it into a deli." And he said, "I'm going to have my hands full with that expansion. I wonder if you'd be interested in learning how to bake the muffins." And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." And he said, "Well, the thing is," oh, well, and I knew this. He said, "You're going to have to come in at 4:30 in the morning to do it."
Yeah.
And but he said, "I'm going to give you a good raise." And I said, "I'm all in for that." So I started coming in at 4:30 in the morning, and I would work till 9 or 9:30. And so I would basically do the baking shift, get the shop open. We opened at 7, and then somebody would come in at 8 and somebody else at 9, and I would go back to my apartment. Had a little efficiency apartment at that point, and I would take like an hour or 2 hour nap, and then I'd hop on the UT shuttle and I'd go to campus, and I'd work in the afternoon, or I'd go to school in the
Do your
afternoon.
classes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I also had a work study job that semester at one of the libraries on campus. And that was probably the second worst job I've ever
Hmm.
had because,
Mm.
yeah, I had to basically put books on the shelves all night. And I, I love libraries and I love to read, but that was not my jam. And I noticed after, about a month, I noticed that Kevin was not getting back to the shop in time to do a lot of the things that needed to be done. Back in those days, the bank closed at 2 o'clock. So if you didn't get your deposit in by 2 o'clock,
Right.
you didn't get your account didn't get credited for it. And I noticed that he was really like he was struggling to get back to our shop to do that stuff. He was struggling to be able to order supplies from our distributors. And so one day, remember, it was a Friday afternoon, and I called him up and I said, hey, you're probably going to say no to this, and that's fine, but I just thought I'd offer. I know that you're having a hard time doing all of these things. And I said, what would you think about me coming on full time? And instead of leaving at 9, I'll just work till 12:30 or 1. I said, I can still hop the bus and get to campus on time, and I'll take care of getting your deposit to the bank. I'll take care of ordering all of the supplies since I'm using them. And at this point, I've got the relationships with the delivery people because they all before 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. And I said, if that would help you, I said, it would really help me because I hate my night job. And I really thought he was going to shoot it down. And he said, you know what? That would be really helpful. Let's give it a try. And so we did. And that was my college life for the rest of my time at UT. I would go in 4 o'clock, 4:30. I'd work an 8 to 9 hour shift, depending on what time my class was in the afternoon. And then I go to class in the afternoon, and it was cool because I might have gotten a BA in Spanish, but I really got hands-on business management and training, and learned all kinds of things that I never ever would have dreamed of learning.
Right.
And,
yeah. I mean, that's crazy. You get all aspects. Not only do you have to do the ordering and the deposits and probably doing some shift work and those kinds of things of running the actual store, you're learning how to make cookies and muffins and all the things, which I've actually had the Kevin's cookies and they're really, really good. And sometimes you should follow Ancora Ministries on Facebook. Sometimes there's a little, I don't know if you can ship internationally, but he does cookie things, specials for fundraising, and you should buy all of them. They're actually really, really good. Okay. So college, you're doing the band thing. Now you're making cookies and muffins and kind of running this location of Kevin's Cookies to help him do the other one. Now I know your lovely bride, and Miss Jennifer. Where is she in this story yet? Is it later on? I mean, we don't have to go into super detail, but she is a pretty important person in your life, and kind of, as they all are, pushes us when we need to be pushed. So let's bring Jen in.
So Jen and I met at a little bitty church in Southeast Austin in the fall of 1991. I think at the time I'd been going there. It was close to where I lived, and I was about the only college student in this church. There was me, a group of people who were about 10 years older than me, and then a bunch of people who were like the age of my grandparents. And I just liked it a lot. And I sang in the church choir. And one day I go to choir rehearsal, and there's this young lady in the front row. I was like, oh, she's new, And so from that point on, everyone else in the church decided that we needed to be a couple. So the funny thing was, I was still dating my high school girlfriend.
Right.
We were serious, and Jen had just gotten out of a serious relationship. So there was no really pressure. We weren't feeling the pressure that was being put on us. But, when you're the only two in the demographic, you tend to gravitate toward each other because you got stuff to talk about. Anyway, during the fall of that year, my girlfriend broke up with me. And so I started spending more time at church because my girlfriend had lived out of town. And so I would go visit her, every other weekend or so. Well, now I'm at church every weekend. The older people, like the people who are 10 years older than us, they're always inviting us to go eat, hang out with them. That none of them had kids yet. So now they're inviting Jen and me along. And so we're spending some time together and just really became great friends. And I went off that summer to do drum corps, and I get back, and and we're spending a lot of time together. And I remember one night, well, so one day, Jen said, I think it'd be really cool to get a tattoo. And I said, oh no, man, that's dumb. I'm never getting a tattoo. And she's like, okay, that's fine. But I think I'd like to get a tattoo. I'm like, that's weird. Well, I go to drum corps and I march all summer behind this bass drummer who has the coolest tattoo on his shoulder. And I get back from drum corps, I'm like, I want to get a tattoo. So I tell Jen, for my 21st birthday, I'm like, hey, let's go get tattoos. And she's like, what happened to you? And I tell her, she's like, okay, let's go. So we go to this place, and I mean, it was sketchy. It was on East Old Wharf, and there was this orange like 70s van outside on the lawn, and it just said tattoos.
See, that's actually perfect. What are you talking about?
Now, you didn't get the tattoos in the van. You had to go inside the sketchy house that the sketchy van was attached to. And so we go in, and Jen she's made this design that she's going to get on her ankle. And I'm like, well, I think I want to get some sort of Celtic cross. And the guy goes, he's like, hey, I don't remember what his partner's name was, but he's like, hey, Bobby, he says, open the drawer that says religious shit. So Bobby opens the drawer, and there's his, he pulls out the options, and I'm like, I'll take that one. So then, so they do mine first, and then after my tattoo, he goes, okay, it's time. I'm gonna do your girlfriend's tattoo now. And I was like, and I almost said, she's not my girlfriend. And then I thought, well, and I just kind of let it lie. And I don't know, it's a week or two later, I'm going home after LHB, that's Longhorn Band. After Longhorn Band practice, and it's a Monday night, and I'm feeling just kind of bummed. And I don't even know why. It hadn't been a bad day. And I realize that I'm missing Jen, because we'd hung out together all weekend. And I think to myself, I wonder if that means that I'm in love with her. I just thought of another story that I'd like to tell, if that's okay.
Sure.
So when I went off to drum corps that summer, this is all happening in 1992. My mom flew into Austin to get my car so that they could, have my car for the summer. So she comes into Austin, and I say, hey, let's go out to eat. I'm going to invite my friend Jennifer. And so we go out to eat. We have a great time. Jen and my mom hit it off. And that night, Mom goes, I really like Jennifer, and I'm like, well, yeah, that's great, but we're just friends. And she's like, okay. Well, apparently she went home and told my dad, I met the girl Trey's going to marry.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and I found out all of that later, right? So, so fast forward back to the fall, I'm going home, and I'm like, I think I'm bummed because I missed Jennifer. And so maybe a week or two after that, she calls me up. She says, hey, I got this free movie pass and a free dinner pass to El Arroyo. You want to go to a movie Friday night? And I go, sure. And I think I said, is this a date? And she said, yes. So we go to El Arroyo right there on 5th Street. Nice dinner.
Yep.
And we go see Last of the Mohicans. And she's driving because she invited me. And she drops me off at home, and I lean over and I give her a goodnight kiss. And the next day we were playing Rice. Texas was playing Rice. It was in October, and it was in Houston. So I said, hey, I've got to get up at like 5 tomorrow morning, go to Houston, but I'll be back tomorrow night. You want me to call you? And she says, yeah. So we go to Rice, go to the game, come home, and I call her, and she comes over, and we watch a movie, and we talk, and just decide, hey, let's give this a try. So we do. And a couple weeks later, we're sitting over a fine meal of tacos at Taco Bell.
The best.
The best.
$59.79.99.
Yes. And we were chowing down to some 59-cent tacos. And I said, hey, what do you think? Should we get hitched? And she looks at me, she goes, yeah. So we sat there and planned out our wedding on a napkin. And it took us about a year because we had to pay for the wedding and save up money for it. But
Right.
it was weird. We'd only dated for a couple weeks, but we'd known each other so well for so long that
Right.
the dating part was sort of a formality because
Right.
we just knew.
You kind of de facto had been somewhat. So, man, that's awesome. And okay, so you're dating and now you're working up to get married. And I know you real well through the ministry thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you were talking earlier about how, like you were doing the choir, and you and Jen were the only ones that were of a certain age and all that other stuff. Let's kind of talk about the transition of how did that have any effect of like later on getting into ministry, or was the ministry thing just like a happenstance kind of thing?
Unstuck Coaches hates it when movement and progress in a person's life or business is stuck, or frozen, or slowed, or just stopped altogether. Well, we have found a solution. Unstuckcoaches.com. They offer a variety of coaching services to get you or your business moving again. Check out unstuckcoaches.com.
I mean, yeah, I think nothing is really happenstance with God, right? But
Right.
it certainly was not my intention to be in ministry. Faith was an important part of my life and an important part of Jen's life. And at that point, we were at a church that it was kind of a dying church, and it was a Methodist church, and the Methodist church is structured where it's an itinerant pastor model. So they assign the pastors and they move them every few years. And
Right.
because our church was considered a dying church, generally they didn't send the rock star pastors. It was usually pastors who were either about to retire or new pastors that
Right.
it was kind of like, let's let you cut your teeth on this. And because of that, the church we went to was a very strong lay, like non-pastor led. So the people at the church were really strong. And so we learned a lot about church leadership, church service, and through that church. And so I think for me and for Jen, we just thought, well, this is the faith part of our life is going to be this. We're going to serve in a church that's going to be important to us.
Right.
And that's pretty much the extent of it.
Well, and I think a lot of us, well, I'm not going to say a lot of us, but it's probably like 50-50. There's people that know from like high school that they're going to do that, get into some sort of ministry at some sort of church, and they pick a specialty, blah, blah, blah. And there's people like me and you who there's no way we're ever going to go work for a church. I mean, we'll be spiritual and we'll serve and we'll do all those kinds of things. But like my day-to-day is going to be revolved around whatever it is. And I'm sure at the time, so you and Jen are doing all this stuff, and are you still at Kevin's Cookies?
Yeah. So what had transpired with Kevin's is he ended up closing his second store, the one that he had expanded, that had sort of opened the door for me. And it's really kind of an acrimonious dispute with his landlord, and it pretty much soured Kevin on the business. So my last about year and a half of college, Kevin started talking about selling the business, like selling the remaining location.
Right.
And I'm like, well, the first time he brought it up, he said, yeah, I'm kind of thinking I don't want to do this anymore, and about selling out. And I started thinking, well, crap, I hope the new boss likes me. And, what's that mean for my job? And he goes, what would you think about buying it? And I went, what? And I said, well, I don't have any money. Like, how much money I have because
you're paying me. Yeah.
Yeah. And he goes, no, he said we could come up with a payment structure where you could make money out of the profits. And he said, I can tell you that you could make money to afford to buy this from me. And I'd never thought about owning my own business. But when he introduced that idea to me, I thought that'd be really cool. And I mean, sort of the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory thing where, hey,
Yeah.
Charlie, do you love my factory? Oh, I think it's the best place in the world. Well, how would you like it? I mean, I kind of felt like it was that. Like, this is the coolest shop in the world. What do you mean you want to sell it to me?
Right.
So when that idea was floated, I thought it was awesome. And it took a couple of years, and some, you know, I needed to grow up a little bit. Kevin had to really get used to the idea. It's one thing to say I'm ready to sell my baby because he had started it, right?
Right.
Um, and it's another thing to be ready to sell, to sell your baby project. But we did. We bought it from him in February of 1997. So there were a couple of years after I graduated and after Jen and I had been married, where I worked for Kevin as his manager, and I worked a couple of other jobs as well because there was a period there where there wasn't a job for me at Kevin's.
Right.
But when the timing was right, I came back on board, and then interestingly, I came back on board and it didn't feel like it was ever going to happen. And I decided that it was time for me to walk away from Kevin's Cookies. And I
Oh.
actually resigned to Kevin and said, hey, I don't think this is going to work out, because I thought we were doing this. And you don't seem to be ready to do that. And because of this tension, you and I really aren't getting along that great anymore. And it's probably better if I just maybe look for whatever is next for me. And
Right.
I said, I'm going to stick around to the end of the year because I have no idea what I'm going to do. Like I said, I haven't looked for a job. I don't know what that is, but that also gives you time to replace me. And so over the course of those like 2.5 months, right toward the end, one day he came to me and he said, hey, I don't know if you're still interested, but he said, I don't really want to do this if you're not around. Like, this is not, you're the reason that this is fun for me at that point, and which was really, it's very touching, right? I mean, Kevin
Right.
is a great boss, a great mentor. He's kind of like this combination of, big brother, dad, and boss all in one, and so he said, listen, we will come up with a deal that will work for you, and we will make it happen in a hurry if this is something that you're still interested. And I was like, yes, I would love that. And so in a matter of, a month, we had an agreement in principle, and within 2 months we had transferred ownership of the business. And so
Nice.
February of 1997, I officially took ownership of Kevin's Cookies. It was now Kevin's Cookies and Deli because that location had expanded also. And at that point, I had dreams of being a cookie mogul. We're gonna open lots of locations and sell our dough to grocery stores, and I was gonna create a scholarship program for my old high school, and it was gonna be amazing. Didn't quite turn out that way, but we had
Well,
a really good run. We opened a second location in 2001 and ended up closing the business in 2010. So we owned it for 13 years, 13 and a half years, I guess. And I'd worked there for an additional 8 years.
right.
And there was a lot that was really good about Kevin's Cookies. There was a lot that I learned. There were a lot of really bad mistakes I made as a business owner, including don't do this at home, kids, leveraging pretty much all of my personal credit when business was bad. My intentions were okay. Like, I wanted to make sure that we made payroll, right? And we paid the rent. But I really, didn't want to believe that maybe we should close.
Right.
And we probably stayed open about 3 years longer than we should have, and we paid for that financially.
Yeah, I
And
think that's the hardest part of if it's going if you're in the rough water after not the glory days, but after everything seems to be okay and running fine, and then it expands or whatever, the location, the amount of people coming to that location changes due to whatever else is going on that have nothing to do with you. Man, that's a hard decision to kind of like swallow and go, because as entrepreneurs, you're like, I can fix this one thing. It's just one thing that that and then the droves will come in.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally get that as far as using your personal credit, your personal finances to try to save something that you love so dearly. But I just want you to know your cookies were really good.
Thank
If
you.
we would have had butter tubs available to us, we could have just sold the butter tubs because
Yes.
I would eat that stuff. I would eat that stuff right out of the tub. I don't even need to cook it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I
But
mean, maybe. I mean, never say never.
no, you're right. Never say never. Like I have now my dream is, well, maybe one of my kids is going to do Kevin's Cookies 2.0 and do it way better than I ever did, you know?
Man, well, let's dream about that one day when we're eating fajitas at our
There you
favorite
go.
place.
There you go. But you know, like I think um what makes it extra complicated, especially if you are a person of faith, is, you know, for me, the Kevin's Cookie story was so wrapped up in my faith journey because, I mean, when I was ready to walk away from Kevin's, I had really prayed about it and I felt like, you know, I'm not really happy at work anymore. And this has morphed into something that you know, it's morphed into something I hadn't intended it to be.
Right.
And, God, is it time for me to move on? And I felt like God was saying, it's time for you to move on. And so, I was willing to walk away from this dream. And then I felt like God handed the dream to me exactly as I had, dreamed it. And
Right.
and so for me, a lot of what I struggled with was, God, if you would give this to me, why are you taking it away from me? I mean, I
Yeah.
think we can all think of a time in our life when we have that conversation, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's a good reminder that God can give you something and there are seasons for things, and just because that season ends doesn't mean that God wasn't in it, in any of it or all of it.
Right. Or that anything yeah, I mean, or you learned what you're supposed to learn, and then you're supposed to take that to the next part of the journey or whatever he's got for you.
Yeah.
So, and then at this time, I think we're both going to the same church,
Yep.
and I know you're serving and all that stuff. Kind of talk about just a little bit of how it, I'm gonna have I want to do a whole different episode that talks about our church journey
Yeah.
because we don't have enough time right now. Let's just be honest.
Yeah. I've already talked way too much.
No, 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 no. But we haven't even got to Ancora yet. So I
I
would
know.
just want to kind of set this up of like, okay, so you're doing this volunteer and you're doing the things at church, and then Kevin's closes, and you're asking what's next. What kind of transpired there?
So somewhere in this time, I had started training in Taekwondo, and I had become an instructor. And one summer, our church used to do, instead of a regular vacation Bible school, they would do a sports camp. And so I was the karate coach for sports camp. And at the beginning of each night of camp, they would have one of the coaches come up, warm up the kids. Really, it's just, they want you to get the kids all excited and crazy, right?
Yeah.
And because I had mostly been teaching kids karate classes, I was able to get the kids pretty excited and crazy. And so they asked me to do it again on the last night of camp, and I did. And about a week later, the kids pastor at the church resigned. And so I love this story because our church's senior pastor calls me up. He's like, "Hey man, I'm gonna come over to your house tonight. I need to talk to you about something." I'm like, "Okay." And I wasn't doing like at that point, I wasn't even serving in the kids ministry. I had just
Right.
this
Yeah.
VBS. And he comes over to my house. He and his wife come over to my house, and I kid you not, they would not leave like until I said yes. And so he says, our kids pastor resigned. I think you're the one. I'm like, heck no, I'm not the one. And he goes, no, I think you are. And I mean, I gave him every single excuse.
Hours and hours of excuses.
Yes. And he would not take no for an answer. And finally I go, look, man, I said, you don't want me to be your kids pastor. I'm going to be terrible at this. I'm not, I've got a past. And he's like, he looks at me, and he says, Trey, we've all got a past. And he says, I wouldn't be here if I wasn't 100% sure that you're the person to do this. And it was kind of a gut check for me, because I realized, really, I'm kind of running from God here. I'm terrified of being in charge of the spiritual lives of kids. I feel like I am not qualified for this. But I just said, fine, I'll do it. But don't
Fine.
expect me to decorate any classrooms. And he goes, that's fine. I don't need you to decorate any classrooms. And, I'll never, ever forget, that he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And,
Right.
I'm grateful for that, because it really set my life on a very different path, that I didn't see it coming.
Right. And I'm just going to go push forward.
Yeah.
Because we'll talk about that other stuff on a different episode that's specifically on that. But you're now in your ministry, and you're loving on these kids and teaching all this stuff, and you're doing taekwondo with a lot of them, because now they're coming to your dojo and that kind of stuff. Now when ministry ends, leaving ministry is really, really hard.
Yeah.
Because you're emotionally attached to not only the church, but to the people and the kids, and you feel like you're in the best spot to change people's lives or to inspire people or whatever. And now you're like, okay, well, I need to figure out something else to do. And that maybe gives me that same kind of rush. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just the spiritual party that happens whenever those kinds of things are right in front of you, and now you're not going to be in front of those anymore. Kind of talk about your transition of trying to figure out what to do, and then how that got to where you are now.
Yeah. I think probably, so I was in pastoral ministry for about 10 years, just a little less than 10 years. And probably the last 2 or 3 years, I've just began feeling this stirring, like, hey, there's something else coming. Like your time here is coming to a close. And, I'd pray about it, like, Lord, are you sure? Like, because you're right. The things, part of the kind of emotional, I don't know, benefit or a rush that you get from ministry is seeing life change and seeing how you're impacting people. But I also think that often we sort of over romanticize pastoral ministry. Like, we think that is the end all be all. Like, if I'm the ultimate Christian because I'm a pastor, and there's nothing better than that, or like you're at the top of the the ministry pyramid, and so that can be kind of dangerous too, right? And especially, like you said, if you're thinking about what's going to fill my cup, if it's not teaching a room full of crazy kids, or seeing this life change.
Because you don't have that title anymore.
Yeah.
You're kind of somewhat so hung up on whatever title it is that you don't think you have the same effect unless you have it. And you get that's the title becomes your identity.
Yeah. And let's just be real. Like, this is what people do. We have egos, and we have pride, and we have brokenness that gives us this need for validation. And often, that title sort of reassures me that I'm worthy of something. And so part of my prayer was like, Lord, is it time to go? Is it time, do I stay? Do I go? And if I go, what in the heck am I going to do? And I just remember feeling very strongly that God was saying, you don't need to worry about what you're going to do next. You need to concentrate on listening to what I'm telling you to do. Like, if I tell you to go, you need to go,
right?
And then we'll worry about what you're going to do next. But for a while, I wasn't feeling that God was saying to go. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to stay. And I did. And I think that, these are the things that we don't know or see or realize what God is doing inside of us and around us when he's preparing us for something. And I love the story of David, right? David, the shepherd boy, he kills like if we think about the linear story of David in the Bible, he's a shepherd boy, he's nobody, he kills Goliath, he's the king. But in between those waypoints is a lot of time
Right.
and a lot of other stuff that's in the Bible, but we just sort of gloss over it. But David couldn't have been the king if all of that stuff over all of that time hadn't happened. I mean, Abraham, same thing, right?
Yeah.
And so I think when you're in the middle of something like that, where you feel like, hey, something's got to change, or something, something different is happening, and I don't know what, trusting God and trusting that something is percolating, even though you don't see it or feel it, trusting that stuff is happening anyway is super important. And so there came a point where I felt very clearly, and one of the things that helped me is I have a good friend named Steve, he's about 15 years older than me, kind of always been a mentor, big brother figure for me. And I remember calling him and talking through this with him, and he said I would ask myself two questions. He said, question number one is, am I growing, is this situation drawing me closer to God or pushing me farther from him? And I said, I think it's drawing me closer to him. And he said, well, then the second question I would ask is, I would just say, God, are you through with me here? And he said, if you're asking God honestly, like, tell me when you're through with me here, then trust that he's going to answer you. And there came a very definite moment where I felt like God said, I am through with you here. Like your time here is done. I'm releasing you. And so that at that point, I said, okay, we're going to go, going to resign and have no idea what in the world is next, but
Right.
I'm going to do it. And in hindsight, I know that there's no way I could have found another job, found my next calling. Like none of that could have happened if I'd also still been working as a pastor, because I just didn't have the capacity to do it. And I kind of needed to recover from that time of being a pastor. And
Right.
it's right.
Yeah, and especially if you're not listening and he's saying go 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 go, he's never going to give you the next thing.
Yeah,
because you're kind of like in a, oh well, I guess he or she is okay with X. Then there's something bigger and better on the horizon. But if you're not going to listen, or if you're not going to take notice of what I'm throwing at you through other people, or through conversations, or for other situations, then yeah, you could definitely, and then you just get disgruntled, especially if you feel like there's something more.
yeah, and it's scary, right? Because we you still got to pay the bills, right?
Yep.
Having a job is kind of important, and B, just like, again, I know I'm not the only person whose identity is too wrapped up in their job. I am really bad about that. Not the only one, but I think when all of those things are at work, it's easy to say, no, I got to stay because of these things. But staying can sometimes hamper you from where God is leading you. And one of the things that I try to pray about very regularly is, Lord, I want to go through every door. I want to walk through every door you open for me. And I don't want to walk through, I don't want to try to walk through any door that you're not opening for me.
Right.
And, that's easy to say and hard to do.
Right. And so you leave ministry as a pastor, and then kind of talk about how Ancora came to be, and what you guys are doing, because you're doing incredible things. And then eventually how people can assist the awesome sauce you're doing down there.
Thank you. Well, I spent about a year working for a nonprofit. It was an organization that our church had partnered with, and which had taken me to Guatemala. I began leading mission trips to Guatemala through this organization's partnership with my church. So I called the organization when I was leaving the church and just said, hey, I don't know what I'm going to be doing for the next few months, but if you've got some work in Guatemala that you need an extra hand for, let me know, because
Right.
I may have some time to go down. And the next day, the director of the organization called me and she said, hey, we're actually about to do a stove project, a safe cook stove project down there, and our team could use an extra hand. And she said, if you can get down there, I'll pay your expenses while you're there. So I went down in May of 2019 to the same region in Guatemala where I'd been taking mission teams for several years. And it was a very different experience. If you've ever been on a mission trip, usually what happens is the group you're with kind of hangs out together, and you operate often in community spaces, right? So your group is interacting with the community group, and it's really cool. It is really cool, but you're not group to group dynamics are very different than what I experienced in May of 2019, because I went down and I was just working with two members of the team of this organization. And we were actually going into people's houses and we were putting together these safe cook stoves and replacing open cook fire. Like, people cook on open cook fires. They're inhaling smoke for hours a day,
Right.
under a roof. They're little kids whose lungs are developing, who are inhaling smoke for hours a day. And we're installing these safe cook stove that routes all the smoke out of the house. It's not a burn hazard. It's incredible. And what happened is, now people, like, they don't want you, like, you go and help them put the stove together, and then they want to give you a Pepsi and sit on the porch with you and talk to you.
Right.
And so, like, the American part of me is like, hey man, we got 20 other stoves to do. We got to go.
Yeah.
But that's, I'm not always wise, but I just thought, I'm going to follow the lead of my friends Julio and Xiomara here, who worked for the other organization, and we'd sit on the porch and we'd talk to people. And I drank a lot of Pepsis. And I tried not to eat the food because my American stomach was not ready for
Right.
rural food in the villages of Guatemala just yet. But I came away from that week having experienced 3 villages in an area where there are 65 just like it, where kids are hungry, where nobody has clean water, where they're all breathing in wood smoke for hours a day, where less than half of the people have a bathroom, like they're peeing and pooping on the mountain. And I remember sitting on the plane on the way home and just, I was overwhelmed. I was like, God, I want every kid in these communities to have enough to eat, and to have clean water, and to have a place to go to the bathroom, and to have a safe cook stove. I don't even know what to do with this. Like, that just sounds impossible. What am I supposed to do? And so over the course of the next year, working for this organization, they wanted me to connect with pastors and try to build church partnerships so that they could raise more revenue and do more work. And interestingly, there's a big difference between being a pastor and being a former pastor. And if you've got any pastors listening, pastors, don't be cliquish, because what I found was that being a former pastor gave me as much of an in for the pastors club as being a nail tech, like.
Right.
And so it was a little frustrating, and it makes me kind of sad for people who are doing really amazing things, who you need that title to get an audience with somebody. And I'm not trying to bash, because we're all inundated with people, right?
Right.
But that part was hard, and that was kind of a gut check from whoa, you're not a pastor anymore. In case you were wondering, here, let's reinforce that.
Yeah.
But it was also kind of a bummer, though, because even partners for our organization didn't want to talk to me because I wasn't a pastor anymore. But
Yeah.
the other part of the job that I really loved was being in the field and learning more about this stuff, and kind of understanding that to operate in Guatemala, you can't just
Show
hop
up.
on a plane, and say, hey, I'm here, let's
Right.
let's buy some safe cook stoves. So I learned a lot about the rules, a lot about the law, a lot about the organizational side of operating an international missions organization. And then COVID hit, and all of a sudden I couldn't go to Guatemala anymore. And at that point is when I felt like God was saying, hey, you remember all those feelings you've been feeling? Notice that nobody else is doing that yet. Maybe it's time for you to do it. And that was really the seed that germinated to, okay, I never dreamed that I was going to, launch a missions organization because it sounded impossible. But
Right.
what I learned is I don't need $1 million to do it. We can start feeding kids for $150 a month. I can raise $150 a month, because part of what I learned during that year with the organization is they said, hey, we want to hire you, but we don't have any money to pay you. So you're going to have to raise your own salary. I was like, well, that sounds crappy.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. But
Right.
I felt like, God, am I supposed to do that? Okay, I'll do that. So I started learning how to raise money to raise my salary. And then when I realized, okay, we don't have to start with a ton of money. We can start small, $150 a month. We can feed, we can bring nutrition to 30 kids in one small village. We can start there. And if I can talk people into paying my salary, you bet I can talk people into feeding kids. That's a much easier pitch for me to make than that. And so, Jen and I talked it over, and we prayed about it a lot, and we launched Ancora Ministries in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic in July 2020.
Yeah.
And I reached out to the contacts I had in Guatemala and said, hey, I'm going to come down in November. I'd like to find our first partner community. Will you help me? And they did. And so I went down there in November 2020, hoping that, somebody was going to pick me up at the airport.
Right.
Hoping at one point I got dropped off at a clinic in the area of Mixco in Guatemala City, which is not a great area to be in. I've got all my suitcases, and my friends that I've spent 2 days with, they're like, we're going to leave you here, and somebody from Cuilapa is going to come get you. I was like, yeah, she said she's coming to get me. We've got a driver. He's going to come, and they're going to pick me up. And they're like, okay, but you can't die while you're here, because that's going to be on us. I'm like, it's fine.
It's fine.
So, they leave, and I'm waiting for Xiomara, who I had worked with through HRI. She was no longer with that organization. And sure enough, they came and picked me up at this clinic, and
off you go.
We went to Crop. Yeah. So it's like, all right, Lord, you literally keep putting people in front of me that I'm trusting my life. I'm literally trusting my life with. And it's been, a little scary at times, but it's been great. And so from there, we have continued to be able to add partner communities. So what we like to do is we like to meet with communities, get an idea of how's the leadership structure in the community.
Give them an idea really quick of what these communities are.
Yep.
These aren't like the burbs. This isn't your little small towns.
Correct. Yeah, these are little villages of anywhere from 80 to 500 to 1,000 people. Many of the ones we work with are in the rural mountains of southern Guatemala. We have begun working with communities in more urban areas also, but the common denominator is these people are abjectly poor. Nobody has running water. Mostly nobody has clean water. Less than half have a bathroom. Most of them are cooking on wood fires. They might be making $2 a day in American money. Like these, it's everybody has one set of clothes and maybe two. So you got to wash clothes every day because you're wearing a set and you're washing tomorrow's clothes. So life in these communities is often like it's just a fight to survive. Where I got to find a way to feed my kids. I got to find a way to stay healthy enough that I don't die because I don't have any money to go to the doctor or the hospital. And if somehow my house that is made up of a corrugated sheet metal for my roof, and my walls might be lumber that I've found in the trash heap or wood that I've cut from the jungle, or just carpets, like my doors might be a bed sheet. And maybe I have a bed, or maybe I just sleep on blankets on the floor. Like it's a level of need that is even the words, I'm saying the right words, but without seeing it's really sort of hard to comprehend.
Well, I know one of your focuses is the kiddos in these villages. And, like you said, it's, and some of these places are so way out there. They gotta kind of survive on what's around them. It's
Yeah.
not like there's a store 10 minutes away where they can get anything. They're just like, okay, well, we got to survive on this plant and maybe this particular animal when it shows up. So you're dealing with kids who may eat one meal, if at all, a day,
So
right?
this is really interesting. Most of the kids probably eat 2 meals a day, and what people are subsisting on more than anything is corn and beans because they can grow them. And and what happens is there are these large nutritional gaps in their diets. So in Guatemala, half of the kids in the whole country are chronically malnourished. In the communities where we've launched nutrition programs, we do an initial assessment, and that initial number is right around 73%. So 3 out of 4 kids that we meet and work with are chronically malnourished. And they might not be hungry, like my stomach is growling because I haven't eaten in 2 days, but they're not getting like a corn-based diet and a bean-based diet. It gives you some, but it doesn't give you iron, doesn't give you zinc, it doesn't give you these things that are necessary for your optimal growth. And so malnutrition, like I always thought, it's like the commercials when we were kids. We're watching these starving children. You're seeing the skeletons, their rib cages are sticking out, and that that is starvation and malnutrition. But malnutrition is a deficit of vitamins and minerals. And what happens is, like in the first 1,000 days of life, your brain is at its most elastic, which means if you are properly nourished from the time of conception to your second birthday, then your brain like kind of develops to its maximum potential capacity. And then from there, obviously what you do and how you develop it is
You put stuff in it,
right,
right?
right.
Yeah,
So I like to think about a balloon, right? Like you blow up a balloon and it's this big. That's your capacity. But what if you blow up your balloon and it's only half the size?
right,
That's your brain's capacity. So whatever you put inside of it is limited by that capacity. And malnutrition basically makes your brain smaller, which means you can't put as much in it. And the way that looks in your life is it doesn't just impact how tall and you are and what your weight is, but it also impacts your level of immunity. What we see a lot when we first go into villages is mom will tell us he doesn't want to eat, he has no appetite. Well, malnutrition messes with your appetite. And so then it
right,
becomes this cycle. Well, I don't want to eat, I'm not going to eat. So not only am I malnourished, but I'm feeding that monster because I'm not putting enough in my body.
right,
If I don't have clean water, then I can't even keep it down because I'm throwing it up or I've got diarrhea and it's all coming out before my body has a chance to process it.
right.
And then I think the thing that is the most just insidious about malnutrition is it changes your intellectual curiosity. So, I go into these villages in Guatemala, and in Guatemala, public school ends at 6th grade. You don't have to go to school past 6th grade. And I used to think, well, gosh, all of these kids, they don't have a chance because they don't have the money to pay tuition at private school. It's not a lot of money, it's probably cost prohibitive for many of these people. But the reason they're not going is they don't want to go. And the
Right.
reason they don't want to go is because they don't have that intellectual curiosity. So you think about, well, now what I could have been, an engineer, a doctor, a professor, a pastor, a teacher, like I'm not going to be because I don't have that motivation, not
Right.
because I'm lazy, but because my brain never got a chance to develop. And I also don't have the stamina and the strength. So I can work in the fields for the rest of my life, but I'm not even going to be at my best with that
Right.
because I've been hindered permanently.
Yeah, you don't have your you don't it's not big enough to absorb all the knowledge that you could put in it. There's no drive to actual increase that. Man, that's crazy. And here's what I love about your organization as well. You say that it's like the international whatever, but you actually do a lot just for the local community we live in. I mean, not only are you fighting it on the international front, but on the local level, you were like, you know what, we're going to do something.
Yeah.
Kind of talk
So
about that a little bit.
So our kids in the US, they've got a different problem. It is more of a hunger problem and not a malnourishment problem, because we don't realize how much of our food here in the US is fortified with vitamins. But we've got, I mean, just in our community here, Hayes County, Central Texas, something like 43% of the kids in our local school district are considered economically disadvantaged. And that doesn't mean that they're all hungry, but it means that thousands of them are. There's just
Right.
not enough to eat at home. And what that means, I mean, I think about how I get, like if you're listening to this podcast and it's almost lunchtime, you're ready for me to shut up so you can go eat, because that's what we do when we get hungry. We're like, I'm distracted, I can't concentrate. I,
Right.
I'm thinking about what's going on in my stomach. And I think about being 7 years old, 8 years old. I mean, as a grown man, I got to learn how to move past that when I'm hungry. But how do I do that if I'm 7? I
Yeah.
can't do that. How am I supposed to learn and be everything I can be if all I'm thinking about is, dang, I am hungry? And so I first got exposed to this idea of weekend backpack bags several years ago. My sister's church was doing a big thing at Thanksgiving, and we went to visit them on Sunday, and we gave out all this Thanksgiving food, and my family, like, we pitched in, and we were, taking food to families' houses, and it was so cool. And I was talking to the pastor afterward, and I said, man, this was awesome. And he said, this isn't even the coolest thing we do. And I said, well, tell me about that. And he starts telling me about this backpack program they had. And he said, we send food home on Fridays with kids so that they've got food to eat over weekends and school breaks when they don't have enough to eat. And it's not like there's nothing to eat at home, right? It's just that there's not enough. And I thought, well, somebody needs to do that where I live. And I kept, I kind of waited around for a few years for somebody to do that where I live. And same thing, right around the time we launched Ancora, I felt like God was tapping me on the shoulder and saying, hey, you notice that nobody's done this where you live? Maybe you should do it.
Right.
So I started calling all of the school administrators that I knew, all of the counselors that I knew. I'm emailing them, and nobody is calling me back. So one day I go up to the school district administration office, and the community outreach person she's kind of a buddy of mine, because when in my pastor days we used to work together helping families. And so I go in and I say, hey, I'm here to see Angie. And the receptionist says, okay, does she know you're coming? And I said, nope, but I'm going to sit in that chair right there. You just tell her Trey Williams is here, and I'm going to be sitting in that chair until she's got about 10 minutes to talk to
Right.
me. Which is, well, I am actually very introverted. And so that was a really bold move for me. But I wait there about 10 minutes, and Angie comes out. She's like, Trey, what are you doing here? And I said, well, you haven't replied to my emails, and I need to talk to you about something important. And so she says, well, come on, let's talk. And I said, listen, I want to tell you about this, not because I think you need to do something or the school district needs to do something. I'm going to do something. I just need you to point me in the right direction. And so I tell her about this. And I had been, I'd started looking at other programs like this so I could get an idea of what food we would put in it, how we would actually make it work. And so I lay it all out for her, and she goes, well, the school you need to go to is Euland Elementary. She said 94% of the kids there are in dire need. And she connected me to one of our local school board members, because she said she's been talking about doing the same thing. So maybe you guys can work together. So I emailed her, Esperanza, and she emails me back. And this was on a Friday. And so she and I met on Monday. And I was like, here's all the research I've done. Like, here's what we can do, And she goes, well, I can talk to the principal at Euland. And we kind of laid out this plan, and we launched this program. And you came up with the logo. So,
Yeah.
Which I know you don't like the logo. I think it's really cool.
I just, it's just the designer in me of like, well, let's update that.
But so the idea is the counselors and teachers, they know who's hungry in their classes and in their schools. And so they basically just give us a number, and they say, hey, we've got this many kids. Could you provide backpack bags for them? And then once a week, we deliver backpack bags to the counselors' offices at the schools. And then they are able to discreetly get these backpack bags to the kids into their, we put them in plastic grocery bags basically so that you can't really see what's inside. But we
Right.
call them backpack bags because they slip inside your backpack. And um, interestingly, the pandemic changed our model because can I tell this story? I know I'm talking a lot.
Yeah. 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 I mean, basically, I wanted to get here so people could understand what not only are you doing, but maybe they can reach out to you to maybe if they have the big idea to start it in their own community or
Yeah.
even team up with you if you're in the local Austin area. But then probably we need to land the plane so and give all of your stuff so people can call you, email you, or visit the website if they want, even if they just want to help out. But
Okay.
yeah, tell this story and then kind of give us the details of how to get a hold of you.
Okay. Thank you. So the pandemic changed things because we were operating in one school and we were sending backpack bags home every 2 weeks. Well, when nobody could go to school, we began to reach out to school counselors to find out which families, you know, people couldn't work, people couldn't go to the grocery store. And so we wanted to find out those families that were hungry. And we were able to deliver food all over our community. And so when schools opened back up that fall, instead of one school, we now had like 8 or 9 schools that wanted to be part of our program. And over the years, this is now we're finishing up year 4. Um, we have now expanded in our school district to every school in the district, save one, because that school doesn't have any need right now. But additionally, a Dripping Springs, which is the next community over, they reached out about a year and a half ago. So we launched a program there in Dripping Springs, and then this school year we've launched programs in a couple of other schools, one in Austin and one in Buda. So I mean, really, our vision is we don't want any hungry kids anywhere. And I'll tell you guys, if you're listening and this is resonating with you, I've been connected to a co-op of like-minded organizations that gives us buying power. It has expanded our menu so we can buy more food and feed more kids with less money. And if you're thinking about creating doing something like this in your community, I would love to connect with you and connect you with people who can really give you resources to launch this, because it is very possible and very necessary. And if you're in our local community and you want to help, we certainly have volunteer opportunities. And being very honest, the best thing that you could do is give us money, because we can do a lot more with your donation than you can do by going to the grocery store, because of the relationships that we have with this co-op and with our suppliers. So, but if you're in the Central Texas area and you're in a community that is not being served, that might be an area where we could come in and maybe launch a program as well. Because ultimately, I love that we've never had to say no to, someone who said, "Hey, can we add kids to the program?" Our answer has always been yes. And we want our answer to always be yes, because we don't want any of God's kids to be hungry or malnourished or to be hindered in any way from becoming what he has created them to be. And for us, that space is, let's feed them. Let's give them nutrition.
Right.
Let's give them those building blocks. And there is we don't have time for this, but there is a spiritual component, and there is a place for that. But that comes through the building of trust and relationship and
Right.
time, and all of those things are so very important.
All right. Well, give them the website and give them an email or something if they want to reach out to you.
All right. So the website is feedkidsrightnow.com. Go to feedkidsrightnow.com, and that's kind of a gateway to our big Ancora Ministries website. But that way you don't have to remember how to spell Ancora Ministries.
Right.
Except that now you do, because I'm going to give you my email address. It's trey@ancoraministries.org. And we could probably put that in the notes.
I'll put it in the show notes for you.
Yeah. Awesome.
So we'll put links in the show notes of how to get a hold of him, just to kind of check out what he's doing and his specific group, not only here locally in Central Texas, but also internationally in Guatemala. And I know, I just know Trey. If you want like a real life demo of what's going on down there, he will he'll let you know when the next plane's taking off and get you on board so you can go down there and help service those villages and those communities down there that really that need the basics. And we're just talking about the basics. Man, Trey, I'm honored that you decided to jump on. We're going to jump on again and have a whole different conversation. But I'm thankful for your friendship, and I'm thankful for doing everything that you do.
Well, I just so appreciate the invitation. I apologize for all of the words that came out of my mouth.
Man, don't apologize for that.
Well,
That's what we're
I
supposed
love
to
you,
do here.
man. You are I appreciate your friendship and love you so much, and thank you.
Yes, sir. All right. Just real quick, you want to pray us out?
Yes, I do. Lord, thank you so much for the way that you've created us. I know that every single one of us who is a part of this, you've given us special gifting and desires and dreams. And we pray, Lord, that you would direct those things within us so that we could be what you've created us to be, and we can do what you've created us to do. And Lord, we thank you for those kids that you have given us to serve. We ask that we would walk through every door that you open for us and walk down every path that you lead us to, God. Thank you for your goodness. I thank you for Micah and for his work, his family, his ministry. And we just ask that we would do our part to make it all work together for your good and for your glory and for your purposes. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. And
amen. All right, buddy. Thank you. I appreciate you coming and guys, go check out the website. Give him an email. Ask him all the questions you need to ask. He's doing awesome things. We'll see you later, buddy.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you for joining us on this latest edition to the Storyfield podcast. We hope that you have been challenged, inspired, and ready to take that next step, whatever that is. If you know someone with an amazing story that needs to be heard, send us an email at info@thestoryfield.com. Have a fantastic day, and we can't wait for you to join us on the next episode of The Storyfield.